What truly governs men? Their love, their loyalty, their fear, or something far colder? You believe power belongs to the one who gives most, who clings hardest, who shows devotion without end. Yet history proves otherwise. The desperate are always consumed, while the detached are obeyed. The world bows not to those who care most, but to those who care least, for indifference unsettles more deeply than hatred and lingers longer than affection. There lies a truth so cruel, so liberating, that once spoken, it cannot be forgotten. Listen closely, for what I reveal will teach you how to rule without chains. Indifference is power, for it unsettles men more deeply than hostility ever could. Hatred can be met with hatred, and love with love, but indifference disarms completely, for it denies the other any ground on which to stand. When you reveal that your heart does not bend to their favor or their rejection, you create a vacuum in which they suffocate, unsure of how to move you. The one who needs less always dictates the terms, for dependence is the true chain that binds men to weakness. Observe carefully. In every negotiation, in every relationship, the side most desperate to hold on will always yield ground, while the one who could walk away at any moment commands the field without lifting a finger. Consider how people strive, not simply for possessions, but for validation, for recognition, for assurance that their presence matters. This hunger is the lever by which most are moved. Yet when you reveal no such hunger in yourself, when you appear satisfied without their gifts, their company, or even their approval, you rise above them as though seated on a throne invisible to their eyes. They chase while you remain still, and in their pursuit, you gain mastery. The irony is that the less you care, the more others will care for you. They will interpret your detachment as strength, your distance as superiority, your silence as mystery. The human mind abhors being ignored, for to be ignored is to be made small, irrelevant, diminished. Indifference turns this weakness against them, making your absence more commanding than another's desperate presence. To withhold care is not cruelty but calculation. It is to hold the reins without needing to pull them. Think of those who squander their energy in endless pursuit of approval. They exhaust themselves to please, and in doing so, they make themselves predictable, even pathetic. But the one who withdraws care is never predictable, for he cannot be baited with promises or threats. He does not rush to answer every call, nor bend to every plea. He teaches others that his attention must be earned, and the more rare he makes it, the more it is prized. Even in love, indifference carries more sway than devotion. The lover who clings inspires pity, while the lover who withholds ignites desire. The ruler who begs for loyalty is betrayed, while the ruler who appears unmoved by it is obeyed. The merchant who is too eager to sell lowers his price, but the one who acts as though he has no need of buyers commands higher value. In every arena of life, the principle is the same. He who appears to need less holds the greater advantage. To care less is not to withdraw from the world, but to master it, for only the detached can see clearly. Only the detached can act with precision. The chains of desperation are for other men. Yours must be the crown of indifference. Emotion is the most subtle chain that binds a man, and the most dangerous, for it disguises itself as strength while quietly exposing weakness. Those who cannot master their feelings are led by them, dragged like captives into battles they did not choose, decisions they later regret, and loyalties that will one day destroy them. Rage makes you reckless, love makes you blind, fear makes you cowardly, and guilt makes you pliable. The world has learned to play upon these strings, and those who cling to their emotions, as if they were treasures, will always find themselves dancing to another's tune. To break the chain of emotion is not to become stone, but to place reason above impulse, to wield your passions as tools rather than be consumed by them. Think of how men are conquered not with swords but with subtle strokes to the heart, a word of praise to trap their pride, a promise of love to hold their devotion, a calculated insult to ignite their anger. The one who responds without pause, who lashes out or clings too tightly, has already lost. But the one who remains unmoved, who sees the attempt for what it is, holds the power to choose his answer rather than be dragged into giving it. Emotions are natural, but to indulge them is to become predictable, and nothing is more fatal than predictability. The man who always rises to anger can be provoked at will. The man who always fears rejection can be manipulated by withdrawal. The man who always desires to please will hand himself over like an obedient servant. To master emotion is to deny others this map to your weaknesses, to force them to wander in uncertainty, never sure which path will move you. In that uncertainty, they hesitate, and hesitation is the death of strategy. Coldness, when disciplined, is not cruelty but clarity. When you remove yourself from the frenzy of feeling, you see the game as it is, not as your wounded heart wishes it to be. You calculate where others rush, you observe where others flail, and you strike only when the moment is ripe. Emotion tempts you to reveal too much, to rush too soon, to surrender before the battle is decided. Restraint, on the other hand, keeps your weapons hidden until the advantage is undeniable. It is not that you should never feel, but that you must never be enslaved. Let your enemies rage until they collapse. Let your rivals grovel until they lose dignity. Let your admirers cling until they drown in their own need. But you, remain untouchable, serene, deliberate. In the silence of your control, you will find that power does not belong to the loudest voice or the fiercest heart, but to the one who cannot be moved except by his own will. To rule yourself is to rule others, and the first conquest must always be your own emotion. Attention is the rarest currency in existence, and yet most spend it carelessly, scattering it upon trifles, giving it freely to those unworthy, until they are left bankrupt of focus and enslaved by distraction. What you care for gains power over you, and what you ignore withers in your shadow. Men think strength lies in action, in generosity, in constant display, but true strength lies in the restraint to withhold. By deciding where your attention falls, you decide what grows and what dies in your presence. To spend it without calculation is to nourish weeds while starving the roots of your own power. Consider how beggars of validation swarm the world. They crave your notice. They thrive upon your response. A word of acknowledgement can inflate their pride, and silence can shatter it. Such is the fragility of man's desire to be seen. If you give freely, they take it for granted, demanding ever more. But when you ration your notice, when you make it scarce, they treasure every drop as though it were gold. Scarcity creates value. The less attention you give, the more it is hungered for, and the one who controls hunger controls the game. Understand also that attention fuels your enemies as much as it feeds your allies. When you react to slander, you give it life. When you chase insults, you elevate the insulter. When you endlessly explain yourself, you become smaller in the eyes of those who listen. By simply withholding your gaze, you starve the fire until it dies on its own. Neglect can wound more deeply than open attack, for to be ignored is to be made irrelevant, and irrelevance is death to ambition. The wise do not pour their attention into the hands of all. They distribute it as kings dispense favor. A glance can elevate a subject, a smile can secure loyalty, a word can ignite desire. But because they do so sparingly, each gesture is remembered, each moment weighed, each silence interpreted. This magnifies their power, for mystery and rarity always breed reverence. Do not mistake this for coldness alone. It is strategy. You must know when to give attention as a gift, when to withdraw it as punishment, when to withhold it altogether as a sign of supremacy. To master attention is to master perception, and perception, more than force, rules the hearts of men. For they do not long for what is abundant, they long for what is withheld. The world belongs not to those who scatter their care upon every voice, but to those who guard it like treasure, who choose carefully where it falls, and who understand that the rarest light casts the longest shadow. Caring too much is a fog that blinds, a fever that makes the hand tremble, and a weight that bends judgment under its burden. When you are entangled in excess care, you no longer see things as they are, but only as you wish them to be, and this distortion is fatal. The man driven by attachment rushes toward outcomes he cannot properly measure, sacrifices advantages for the illusion of security, and fights battles that reason would have told him to avoid. To care less is not to withdraw from the field, but to step upon it with eyes unclouded, free to weigh every move with the clarity of an observer rather than the desperation of a participant. Detachment sharpens the mind into a blade. The one who feels too deeply misreads the board. A threat appears greater than it is. A promise seems more certain than it should. A betrayal wounds more than it matters. But the detached man studies all of this with distance, knowing that the world is not ruled by sentiment but by advantage. He sees the truth hidden beneath appearances, the weakness concealed behind boasts, the desperation veiled in declarations of strength. Where others rush forward, driven by care, he holds back until the perfect opening reveals itself. Consider the statesman who grows too fond of his allies. He becomes their servant. The general who cares too much for the lives of his men cannot win wars, for his enemies exploit his mercy. The merchant who clings too tightly to his goods ends by selling them cheap, while the one who waits without attachment makes others pay dearly for what they desire. In every sphere of life, excess care is a chain placed upon your own wrist, while detachment unlocks the hand and allows it to strike when the moment is right. It is not that you must kill care entirely, but that you must place it in its rightful place, beneath strategy, beneath foresight, beneath control. To act from care is to move impulsively. To act from detachment is to move deliberately. This difference is the line between victory and ruin. For the emotional man fights the battle to prove himself right, while the detached man fights only when he is certain to win. Restraint is often mistaken for weakness, but it is restraint that preserves strength. By caring less, you conserve your will, your energy, your focus, while others burn themselves out in displays of passion. You remain calm while they exhaust themselves. You remain calculating while they stumble blindly. You remain poised while they collapse. The game of life does not reward those who feel most deeply, but those who see most clearly. And clarity belongs only to the one who has stripped himself of the fog of care. Rejection wields a force far greater than affection, for in it lies the power to reverse the roles of need. The one who rejects declares, without words, that he requires nothing, while the one who is rejected is made to feel lacking, desperate to prove his worth. To turn away calmly, without anger, without apology, is to elevate yourself above the reach of another's grasp. It creates a hunger in them that no gift of attention could ever satisfy. Men chase most fiercely what slips from their grasp, and nothing slips away more powerfully than a hand that refuses to hold them. Observe how the world bends before those who can walk away. The lover who departs first lingers longest in memory. The ally who refuses alliance is courted more desperately. The rival who ignores the duel appears more dangerous than the one who accepts it eagerly. Rejection becomes not a denial, but a subtle proclamation of superiority. I have no need of you, but you have need of me. And in this imbalance, control is born. It is not cruelty that makes rejection potent, but restraint. For to reject with bitterness reveals you are still entangled. To reject with indifference reveals that you have already won. The man who must explain why he withdraws is still pleading his case, but the man who withdraws silently leaves others scrambling to invent explanations, each one inflating his aura rather than diminishing it. Silence after rejection is heavier than 1,000 words, for it forces the other to wrestle with their own insignificance. This principle governs all arenas of power. The prince who does not beg for loyalty receives it more faithfully than the one who clings to every ally. The merchant who lets a buyer walk away often finds the buyer returning at a higher price. Even in war, the army that retreats by choice gains more terror in the enemy's imagination than the army that lingers to be defeated. Rejection, when wielded with precision, transforms absence into presence, loss into leverage, and departure into domination. Men often believe that gaining favor secures power, yet it is the act of denying favor that commands it. He who always says yes becomes a servant, but he who knows when to refuse becomes a master. To reject is to remind the world that your value does not rest in their hands, but in your own. And when they realize this, they will strive endlessly to regain what you so effortlessly withheld. The act of turning away is not weakness but authority. For only the strong can reject without fear, and only the free can choose silence over explanation. Thus rejection, more than acceptance, crowns you with power. Freedom is not found in abundance, nor in the possession of all things, but in the refusal to be ruled by need. The man who cares less is unshackled from the demands that enslave others. He cannot be bribed with promises, threatened with loss, or bent by fear. For what can be taken from him if he has already chosen to live without clinging? To loosen the grip of care is to loosen the grip the world has upon you. This is the essence of power, not to possess everything, but to be beyond possession. Those who care too much live as captives. They are bound by their longing for approval, for wealth, for recognition, for love that they cannot bear to lose. Their every step is dictated not by their will, but by their fear of losing what they hold dear. A ruler chained by the affection of his people will bow to their whims. A merchant enslaved to riches will sell his soul for gain. A lover addicted to the beloved will endure humiliation to keep her near. These are not masters of their fate, but prisoners who guard their own cages. The one who cares less walks free. He chooses when to give and when to take, when to stay and when to depart, when to fight and when to let go. He cannot be blackmailed, for no threat pierces the armor of detachment. He cannot be flattered into folly, for praise does not intoxicate him. He cannot be deceived by false promises, for he is not desperate to believe them. In every encounter, his freedom allows him to dictate, for men instinctively yield to those who need them less. Yet this freedom is not emptiness. It is mastery. To care less does not mean to feel nothing, but to place care where it strengthens rather than weakens. It means to love without being consumed, to strive without being enslaved, to hold without being bound. The man who is free from desperate care still loves, but he does not collapse if love leaves him. He still seeks wealth, but wealth does not own him. He still pursues honor, but honor does not dictate his worth. His care is deliberate, never desperate. His will remains sovereign. In such freedom lies the highest form of power, for no man can dominate the one who governs himself. Chains fall away, dependence dissolves, and the soul stands upright, unbent by threat or temptation. And when others see this, they cannot help but yield, for freedom commands respect in a way that need never can. To care less is not to be hollow, but to be sovereign. It is the mark of the one who lives by choice, not compulsion, and thus stands above all who kneel before their own desires.